Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the Directors Organizational Meeting for the Lincoln City Council for Monday, May 3rd, open. Any adjustments to the agenda that anybody can see on here? Okay. City Clerk.
I have nothing. I've received no motion to amends or any changes, so pretty simple meeting.
And you had sent out earlier who's going to be doing the introducing and such. Okay.
Yes.
Looks pretty cut and dry. Thank you. For the mayor's office, anybody, I know John said the mayor is at a press conference, 2:30, and the mayor will be here next week for our directors meeting. That's okay with everybody? Get all your questions, put them in a Dropbox and send them to her, so.
Where is that Dropbox located?
The fourth floor.
Fourth floor.
Thank you.
So is Jennifer here, by any chance? Jennifer Brinkman?
No, I didn't
No?
see her. I thought John would be down here. He's probably,
John's coming right now.
down.
He's in
Is he?
the,
You have any questions for John?
Yeah. I do. It's,
Okay. Come on up, John.
hello. Jennifer Brinkman in the mayor's office sent us some follow-up information to David Hahn's concern about some of the areas and the overgrowth and fires, and Jennifer was very responsive and sent us drawings, but I guess I'm not familiar where some of the fires have started and the challenges exactly where in the map some of these incidents have been happening. Are they on private property? Who is responsible for like fire protection, growth management on private areas as well as public areas? And so it kind of raised a lot more questions, and I didn't know if you're familiar with that or have any answers.
A little bit. John Carlson, the mayor's office, and again, we can get you additional information too. I think in general, it was kind of in that between O Street, next to the baseball stadium, along Salt Creek, and there's mixed ownership, but the ownership varies between the city of Lincoln and the NRD. That ownership, there is some private ownership too. Certainly, Lincoln Fire and Rescue is charged with serving any fire that would break out, regardless public or private. Right? They're going to respond even if it's on private property. I think the access becomes that there aren't necessarily service roads along Antelope Creek. There are some trails along there too. And NRD does maintenance, the city of Lincoln does maintenance also. And LFR does respond to requests there. So I'm not sure if Mr. Hahn was, I'm not sure what the communication was between Mr. Hahn and LFR, but the information we got back from LFR was that they do respond to those calls. They are able to respond to them. They're actually have some older equipment that's their brush fighting equipment that's actually in their CIP to replace, so they'll have more updated equipment. So they are able to respond to those calls and do respond to those calls.
So each parcel owner is responsible for their own, fire brush management, right?
I suppose so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then with some of the homeless camps that have been springing up, who's responsible for that? Are they on the NRD land or are they on private property? And who's taking initiatives? Who's having some of our nonprofits come out and do outreach, community outreach with these groups?
Yeah, it's a mix. I don't know the exact locations, but I certainly know in general they tend to be on public lands. Private lands will put up no trespassing. It's not always the case. Sometimes that area near the mission is on private property, and we've worked with them. But in general, and the pandemic has added an additional level of complexity with that, because there has been some guidance with the CDC early on, before there was capacity building in terms of homeless shelters and whatnot, to, if it was warm and people were safe otherwise, to let people sort of shelter in those spots early on in the pandemic. But there was outreach that was done. Lincoln was great early on about increasing capacity and for folks to be able to find indoor shelter. And so those outreach efforts were made in order to help people find those accommodations. Both LTU and the police and fire will respond to those and do cleanups They've been more challenging because they had to take extra care during the pandemic in order to do some of those cleanups. Yeah.
Tammy, you have something to say?
I do. Thank you. I'm glad that you brought this up, Councilwoman. I had a long conversation just this morning with Lynn Quinzer, who was really helpful. I had a Zoom meeting last week between myself and David Hahn for a long time because a lot of it is concentrated out in District 4 in Salt Valley View, which is no surprise to the council or to you. But I think what would be helpful, I didn't know until I talked to Ms. Quinzer that in addition to the NRD, the railroad, there's railroad property also involved, which makes it super complicated for us to respond to as a city. I think what would be helpful to Mr. Hahn, from my point of view, is, and I talked to Lynn about it, is a collective response from our departments, if it's possible, to see all those. I know that we respond, we go in, we clean it up. I know I read in the paper, the article came out the day after I spoke with Mr. Hahn, and I think Director Johnson maybe is in charge of a May 17th meeting. Part of what I'm hearing from Mr. Hahn is he's concerned about the homeless population, but he also lives in the district, so he's also concerned about fire and the encampments and what we can do as a city and what we are doing. So I think we have a lot of fragmented responses going on. He said he's heard from a couple of my colleagues, not much to any of his satisfaction yet, so I think we're all kind of stumbling, John, a bit to see. He is very skilled and compassionate and tenacious, and rightfully so, and has some experience in public office attempts. So I think that I want to be able to respond better without keeping, like we've all done, going directly to the department heads if we don't have to, because they keep answering us, which is great. But I think if we can collectively do something, I don't know what you might suggest, but I'm interested in what that might look like. I don't know if that May 17th meeting is open to the public. I've not talked to him about that. That was a great article. Mm-hmm. One of his concerns, and it concerns me, and I don't know what we do about this, is because we all like and support our local nonprofits, but he's hearing and is concerned that food is going out to this population, and sometimes that is not the answer, and it encourages that special population in not the right way, perhaps. Yeah. And I don't know what role we have in that all the time. So there's that is going on. So it's a lot of moving parts, and I don't know how we can best get our arms around it, but I'd like to talk with you more, yeah, and Lynn more, sure, so that we all don't keep, if we don't have to, going to all the department heads all the time. And
no, and I appreciate you saying that, and that is my job, and I'm happy to do that, because okay, I've seen some email traffic too, where Jennifer's sure been responding to individual people, yeah, so right, that we just get a memo put together so everybody has the available information, and that we are
okay, that would be great. If that would work for my colleagues, that would be, I think, very helpful.
That's great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilperson Washington.
Councilwoman Ward, thank you for adding to this, because I've also responded probably not adequately on this one, and the article that was in the paper this weekend, shows another area where we have a similar problem. Fires aren't so much the issue yet. Well, hopefully never, knock on wood. But I would like to see what we can do, because it is a very dense issue. And my concerns also get into floodplain management and just sort of the danger of flooding in that area where people are camping there. And some of the trash that gets moved in the floods is dangerous right when it's moved.
Sure.
So I would like to talk about that big, deep issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You guys stay on that, and that'd be great. I see up there on that part of town, or right up there, kind of by the big parking lot and the stuff, I see probably the largest landowner is JPA. Mm-hmm. And so they're also part of it. Mm-hmm. So yep, having you on that would be very helpful. Mm-hmm. Glad to. Yeah. So, okay, thank you. Public update from Director Lopez. Thank you for coming down. I know you enjoy your weekly trip down here.
I do, actually. It's a chance to get information out. So to date, we have 31,005 cases. 32 were from yesterday. Our total number of cases reported last week ending May 1st was 247, which was lower than the week ending April 24th, which was 300. We're having a weekly case rate of around 289 cases per week. That's been pretty stable the last 4 weeks. And to date in April, we have 1,310 cases. Our positivity rate for last week was 7.1%, and our past 7-day average of cases is 37. And our positivity rate really is remaining relatively flat for the previous 4 weeks, around 7%. But last week, ending this past Saturday, we were at 6.4% compared to the 7.1 the week before. In Lancaster County, 90.5% of all of the people who've had COVID have recovered now. We've had 232 deaths in our county due to COVID. In February, there were 23 deaths, and then in March, we had 6 deaths, and in April, we had 5. And you can remember the time when we were really high, December, January, and February. So that's really encouraging. On to what we're doing to help stop the spread of the virus, in addition to other things, are vaccinations. So we've given 271,628 doses of vaccine in Lancaster County, and of those doses, 163,256 individuals received their first dose, and 108,272 received their second doses of either Moderna or Pfizer vaccine or the Johnson & Johnson. So in all, we're at 48.7% of our 16 and older age group fully vaccinated in the community. We had special clinics the last 2 weeks in the high schools that you heard about. And the Test Nebraska Insight is offering vaccine on Wednesday and Saturday. They started offering J&J this past Saturday. Previously, it had been Moderna. And last week, we completed a second dose clinic for 8,000 individuals, 49 and older, on Thursday. Good. This week, we're offering an 8,000 second dose clinics on Thursday and Friday at the event center. And we will have we had another clinic at UNL today where we provided Johnson & Johnson vaccine at their request. And that was open to all the higher education, not just UNL. And we also will have clinics at the Air Park Rec Center tomorrow night from 3 to 7, and the Belmont Rec Center on Wednesday night from 4 to 6. And our hospital usage is right around 34 today, and of those 34 individuals hospitalized, 27 are from Lancaster County. So I'll stop there.
Do we have any questions for Director Lopez? No, it's good. This week's all first dose or?
Yes.
Johnson & Johnson or?
Except for Thursday and Friday will be second doses at the event center.
At the event center.
And we're only doing Pfizer, except for this morning we did Johnson & Johnson at UNL. Okay. And then we're going to be offering that. The staff is working with Pastor Tom and with Matt Talbot in the jail to see if we have to do second doses at the jail and city mission in the next week or so. So we're going to see if anybody wants Johnson & Johnson there too, in addition to those second doses. And we're going to be working with Matt Talbot to go out now that they've opened for meals again.
Okay. Councilperson Raybold.
I have a question. I know you have reached out to some of the high schools. Are you going to reach out to more high schools, or you're already done with reaching out to all the high schools?
We've reached out to all the high schools. We've had a clinic at Erie High School, both in the county and in the city, regardless. Lincoln Public Schools, Norris, Waverly, Lincoln, Lincoln Lutheran, Pius. So I think we have everybody covered. We offered for College View Academy and other schools to go to Lincoln Lutheran.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Director Lopez? Nope. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
Constituents correspondence, we had quite a few this last week. We've all read them, they're all part of our record. And now we'll work into our last item, agenda council discussion to discuss public comments via Zoom. Would you like to come up, both of you?
I wanted to, at least before we adjourn, I think there is a motion to amend.
Okay,
It's for.
on the agenda?
On the agenda, yes.
I just emailed it to all of you.
That's what the buzz was.
Okay,
It is item 6D, and it just changes a date.
oh, yeah,
I think it says May 1st, 2021. It changes it to 2022.
On 6D,
Yes, 6D.
it's
It would
urgent
be the
project.
attachment.
Okay. There's just a change of date. Okay.
mm-hmm,
Okay,
May 1st, 2021 was a mistake. That wouldn't make sense, so.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Councilperson Raybold, you want to start our discussion?
well, I think it all started with the clarification of what political subdivisions can and cannot do. And I'm glad they cleared that up so that now we do have the capacity or capability of going Zoom should the pandemic worsen or another pandemic come our way. But I know this has been a request from a number of people to try to participate even without the pandemic, via Zoom going forward, to be able to have their voices heard. And certainly for some people, it's a challenge to come down for whatever reason. So I just wanted to include their comment and bring it forward to see how challenging would it be to be able to include Zoom in two ways for some of the agenda items for those who would like to testify on those items, and then also, secondly, for those that would like to testify during public comment, open mic night via Zoom.
Yeah, and I can I can tell you from a technological standpoint, I'll let Johansi's office kind of comment on the legalities and how that would all happen. But from a technology standpoint, we've been kind of anticipating that Zoom's here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had several requests. For example, we're involved now in several boards and committees that we've never really been involved in the past, things like the MPO and the historic preservation and a few of those boards and commissions that meet maybe on a monthly basis or things like that. So a lot of folks are wanting to use Zoom now, and so we've kind of been preparing from a technology standpoint to go from what we initially put into place as kind of a temporary fix to get us through the pandemic to now we're kind of anticipating that it's probably going to be here to stay. The challenge that we run into once we have the technology in place is that from our standpoint, it's really what used to be a two-person job is now, or a one-person job is now a two-person job. So like right now, this meeting, Bo is in back and he's directing, he's watching audio levels, changing cameras, changing graphics, things like that, monitoring the feeds. And then when we've had Zoom involved, we've had, usually Bo or myself would direct the meeting and the other person would handle the Zoom portion of it. So if we were going to get to the point where we were going to be doing Zoom on a regular basis, the issue we run into is there are days when there's only one of us in the office. We have things like vacation and time off and heaven forbid one of us would be sick one of those days or something like that, but we would need assistance from probably the city clerk's office for these meetings, the clerks in the planning department, county board, and, all of the other agencies and commissions, to have somebody from their staff who could be the, for lack of a better term, Zoom moderator, and then we could focus on, making sure that the broadcast is happening. The other thing that we're kind of preparing for is right now, if we have 2 different events going on at the same time, even if it's a Zoom meeting that we're not broadcasting, it has to go through all of our production equipment in the control room in order for us to allow for a Zoom participant to hear everybody here and have everybody here be able to hear the Zoom participant without some of the bad audio feedbacks that we discovered early on in the pandemic and kind of got ironed out since then. So we do have equipment. Some of it is here and waiting to be installed. Some of it, I just got a text and the installers are arriving in about 40 minutes and they're going to be here all week working to add remote controllable cameras that will also be able to feed Zoom in room 303 upstairs in the Luxford studio next door, and then also making sure that this room is integrated into it so that we'd have the capability of doing Zooms from 3 different rooms. And the other thing that we're trying to do is to engineer a way that it doesn't have to go through all of our production equipment, so we could potentially have 3 different Zooms going on interactively at the same time. However, we're not there yet.
Okay. Yes, Councilperson Christensen.
Are we at a point where we can allow public to make comments in the comment section on a Zoom meeting?
Yes. Once again, we'd need to have somebody there monitoring it, and if we wanted it relayed to the problem, the other problem that we would have, and it could be something that you guys could all be logged into the same Zoom on your laptops and have them in front of you. The issue that we have is when more than one laptop are in the vicinity of each other, you need to make sure that you're shutting off your microphones and your audio, because once they start picking up the audio from
Feedback.
each other, you create a terrible feedback loop.
How about when it's on YouTube? YouTube comments as well?
Yes, we don't get as many YouTube comments. We do get some that happen, and we haven't in the, normally we do not have comments enabled on them, but during a live meeting there is, folks are able to chat back and forth. That's not anything that we've monitored in the past or anything like that. You could be logged into both Zoom and YouTube, and we also broadcast on Facebook, so you'd probably want to be on that too. My suggestion would be for people, if they wanted their comments to be heard and part of the record, to suggest that they use only one of those platforms, rather than just, trying to keep track of all of those would probably be, and conduct a live meeting would be burdensome, I would guess.
Well, I think Sony has been able to do that when we have done that, particularly with public comment. And if, they're having audio or video difficulty, they communicate to Sony via chat. So she's able to.
Yeah, and so we'd have to have somebody in here monitoring and moderating that, yeah.
Yes, Councilperson Washington.
This is a very interesting discussion. Jamie, I really appreciate the initiative you have in managing the technical pieces and, having workmen arriving momentarily.
Well, that wasn't planned, that's just a coincidence.
Anyway, so there's the technical stuff, but there's
Yeah.
also now the sort of the protocol pieces of this. I mean, I love the idea that Zoom is a possibility. One of my biggest drawbacks is we're not positive where the people live and if they're residents of Lincoln when they Zoom in. I mean, they could be residents of Burbank. Though I would love to hear from lots of people, I don't think that I want our meetings taken over by people who aren't residents making comments and suggestions on life in Lincoln. So can we geocache? Is there
We,
Geofence, thank you,
when you
not
set
cache.
up,
We can
when
make-
you set up a Zoom meeting, I will have to explore how far you can pinpoint locations.
Yeah.
For example, right now, Information Services has recommended that we don't allow Zoom participants when we set up our meetings for coming from other countries.
Good idea.
We have run into issues with that when a representative from a developer at a planning commission public hearing was working out of their office in Canada. And he normally works in Lincoln, and he was involved in the project in Lincoln, and he wasn't able to log in because he was working in their Canada office on another project at the time, trying to Zoom in. So even just because he's in Canada doesn't mean he isn't a Lincoln resident.
Right.
So, you know, there are ways to run into things. And the other thing that I would suggest doing kind of in relation to that is, we haven't had it happen here, but you hear some horror stories of what's called Zoom bombing, where people will find out about a public meeting and,
I've experienced.
yes. You know, you'll want to look out for that. One of the things that was suggested to us that has been very helpful, that I would suggest doing if you're putting it together as a policy, is we don't conduct them as a public meeting, we conduct them as a webinar, and people have to register. And at that point, you can allow, for example, we could allow the council members or department directors in as what's called a participant in the webinar, or a presenter, and they're able to chat back and forth like a meeting, but then the attendees are able to watch, but they're only allowed to speak if given permission by the meeting host. And that's been a very good way of, making sure that we don't have multiple members of the public always trying to talk over one another, but also, you know, it makes it fairly orderly, and if somebody is on the meeting and hoping to disrupt, you can eliminate them fairly quickly.
Right, yeah, and I think that when you're talking about comments, you know, when I think about comments coming in while the meeting's happening, it feels like that's also a possibility of interrupting other people who are speaking, because
Correct.
it's very hard to like be listening and then have the chat box,
Yeah.
you know, that's, so I like the idea of webinar, and, you know, you're gonna speak when you're called on. All right.
But from the technology standpoint, we're getting ready to have it available. We're working with the Public Building Commission on getting it in what's called Zoom rooms established in this room, the Luxford studio, up in room 303, so that any department, if they were needing to do, you know, even if it wasn't a formal public meeting, but if it was just a staff meeting or, you know, something along those lines that they wanted to conduct over Zoom, they'd have those Zoom rooms available to them also. So I'll be presenting some of that information to the Public Building Commission, and we'll see where that goes.
Okay. I think at this point, yeah, Councilperson
Well,
Rabel.
I just wanted to share that Councilwoman Ward and myself had an opportunity to visit with a councilwoman from Bloomington, Indiana, last week or the week before. And in Bloomington, Indiana, they have been having all their meetings since COVID last year via Zoom. And sometimes it can get rather lengthy with public comments on different matters, but I think, correct me, I'm going to ask Richard about the Open Meetings Act. People have to identify like their address when they get up to speak or get onto Zoom. They have to say, hey, my address is in such and such in Ontario, Canada. And you know, that's sort of a flag, but, you know, they should have a right to speak if they're speaking intelligently on an issue that they're familiar with, and they might be a former Lincolnite or a current Lincolnite who just happens to be working in Canada that day.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll let other people handle
The
how you
policy.
use it. We can make
policy.
sure the technology's in place.
And we're not going to settle that today, but
No.
at this point, my intention was to put together a small group of a few of us to kind of get down into this a little more. and I was gonna wait until after the governor, so the governor did make their decision and how that bill got passed for the Opens Meeting Act. But I'd like to probably wait until next week to start that committee, as soon as we know who would like to be on it. Let us know. Maybe James will be running that, or somebody else will, who's ever our chairman at that point, and then start to figure out if there's any policy and what kind of policy we can do and how we can do it physically. And
Can I ask Johansi to come up? And I know he sent out a memo clarifying,
Thank you.
the interpretation. Thank you, Jamie. The language
Jamie.
in the legislative bill. So the question I have, is it applicable only when we have a declared state of emergency?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the only time that we would permit Zoom.
Well, that's, the public body is allowed to meet virtually during a governor-declared emergency. The question of allowing the public to participate via Zoom is a different analysis, and the Open Meetings Act does allow that the body may allow the public to participate via Zoom.
So if
Or
this,
virtual conferencing is the language that's used.
whether or not the governor has declared a state of emergency, going forward, the public can participate.
Correct.
Did you see any, legal pitfalls on some of the things that Jamie was saying? If someone wants to Zoom in from another country and make comments, but they must identify themselves and where they live, correct?
Correct, and that is a change in the recent Open Meetings Act, the requirement that anyone addressing the public body shall identify themselves and give their address. Before, it was just, I think it was the public body may require it. Now the Open Meetings Act says that the public body shall require that. So yes, that is, someone has to give their name and their address. And I don't have any legal concerns that are jumping out at me right now based upon what Jamie was saying in the conversation that you guys were having with him. I will certainly think about it some more, but no, I'm not concerned about anything.
So I guess the interesting thing that I saw that Jamie had mentioned about conducting it more as a webinar that has greater controls so that you may not speak until you have been given permission to speak, which is pretty much how we run this in the chamber. And so I didn't know if there's any legal parameters of restricting someone's right to speak if we do it with a webinar versus a strictly Zoom meeting where they can communicate in the chat their concerns or throw comments out there. Certainly, I think the way that we've done it, or the way Sunny has done it, has been done quite well, that people can't be disruptive or interrupt. When it's their turn to speak, they have their 5 minutes.
And again, I'll think about it some more and probably the best practices and policy procedures to have in place, but allowing people to participate via Zoom, virtual conferencing, I think if, it kind of how we were doing it before, it was just public comment. And so if we're gonna let people, testify via Zoom and stuff, that we might want to spend some more time thinking about webinar and what needs to be in place if we're going to go that route. So I'll do that.
Okay, so since other municipalities have been doing this and doing it somewhat successfully, I would say, I don't know if you have staff people that dig in and reach out to other municipalities and how they've been handling it and their policies.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Sometimes their Open Meetings Act might be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll certainly do that as well.
Well, thank you. We'll keep talking, see what we can get done.
Yeah.
Any other questions for, yes, Councilperson Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the cancellation of our Commons meeting, I was sort of curious what was going to happen with the conversation about opening chambers. or increasing the number of bodies and chambers.
We can have that conversation, yeah, with our county board members.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
sort of hopeful that we would be able to have that conversation, then I saw that Commons was postponed or canceled.
Okay,
I think we were going to wait and reschedule it when, after the elections,
Oh,
and make sure new council members were seated, if that were to be the case.
I'm just anxious.
We
I'm
can
anxious to have the
continue to have-
conversation about.
yeah, we'll continue to have a
Just to
conversation.
clarify, yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody want to speak with any of the directors that are in the house? Yes, Councilperson Ward.
Director Marvin, please.
Or Mr. Shob? Nobody?
I also wanted some of Director Marvin's time, so
Okay.
I will take whatever's left over after.
Councilperson, what's your name, Bowers? No, just kidding.
I was hoping I could just chat with Director Lopez for a second, and then if Jamie Wenz is still here, I just got a quick question for him.
I'd like a minute of Chief Jackson and Director Johnson.
Okay, and I'd like to talk with Director Elliott and Chief Jackson.
Jackson. Chief Jackson's popular, I like to talk to
Oh,
him
you didn't
too.
have to call him Johnson.
That's right.
Jackson Johnson. Yes,
And I would like Director Elliott and Chief Jackson as well.
okay. Anything else? We stand adjourned.
Okay, great.